About this on Monday, and the Welsh Government has in fact voted to bring in a ban on politicians lying, and they'll come in before the 2026 Senedd elections.
So this is, of course, despite earlier opposition from Labour to the Plaid Cymru amendment, but the passing of the ban has been described as a historic moment that would combat the threats that lying in politics poses to democracy.
Well, let's talk to the Barrister Sam Fowles, who provided legal advice on the amendment and is a great friend of this programme. Sam, congratulations. You must be delighted.
Thank you.
It was 30-30. Yeah, was it close? What was the vote? What were the numbers?
In the end, the vote, it wasn't close at all. Sorry, as you can hear, I've been making speeches to politicians all of yesterday, so I've lost my voice a bit. But in the end, it passed very, very comfortably because all of the parties were in fact united. We got to about lunchtime, and it became clear that it might scrape through in its original form. And the Welsh Government came to us and said, look, would you fancy it, rather than doing this in a sort of divisive way, how would you feel about bringing everyone together, coming to an agreed position? And that's so rather than it happening tomorrow, it happens before 2026. We build a coalition around this and we do it by consensus. And because it's a constitutional change, I think everyone in the Senedd would prefer to do it by consensus and coming together. And I think that's fair and that's right.
Sam, I've heard these compromises before, and it has a whiff of compromise. Are you going to have your policy watered down?
Well, I certainly hope not. That's
not very convincing, Sam. Sam, that's not very convincing.
Speaking personally, that was my first response as well. When I first heard what was being offered, I said exactly that. And so what was insisted on was two really clear things. One, that this is going to be a deliberate deception issue, and two, that it's going to be independently enforced. So it's what we had before in the Westminster Parliament and in the Senedd is lying has always been banned in theory, but the only enforcement comes from these sort of internal processes. So politicians mark their own homework. What was agreed yesterday is that's going to end. This is going to be an independent judicial process. So there'll be no politicians involved, and they'll be held to account like the rest of us are.
Sam, can you give us a concrete example? People who are watching at home are thinking, they're trying to think where it would be a lie and where it might just be, well, that was what I believed at the time. Give us an example and what the consequences would be.
Yeah, well, let me give you a hypothetical but concrete example. If a politician were to say, I have never met with the Russian ambassador, and there were a photograph of that politician meeting with the Russian ambassador, that would be a statement of fact, and it would be false. So that would be outlawed by this new proposal. The consequences would be, number one, they get an opportunity to correct themselves. They get 14 days to say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Here's the real story. If they don't do that, well, then they could be banned for up to 4 years.
Does it mean they just get better at lying?
I think not. I think it means that they get better at distinguishing when they're talking about opinion and when they're talking about fact. So, and I think that's good for voters. I think voters want to be able to know, is a politician giving their opinion, in which case, fine, we want politicians to give their opinions. Is a politician trying to convince me that something is fact when it's not? And it's the second one that crosses a line.
Well, let's ask you a specific question as well. We've been talking a lot in the programme, Sam, about Boris Johnson, who appeared on the campaign trail for the first time last night. He specifically told the House of Commons on one occasion there were no parties, referring to the lockdown parties. Under this law that you're bringing in Wales, which we hope isn't going to be watered down, would he be facing up to a 4-year ban?
My personal view is that yes, he would. Clearly, there were parties. Clearly, he was making a statement of fact, and clearly it wasn't true. And I think that's is a really good example of like how important this is, because this is about restoring trust in politics, right? And we need as voters to know that when politicians deliberately deceive us, there's going to be real consequences for them, not just their mate voting in a committee about whether to impose some consequences, but the same hard consequences that you and I would get if we broke the law. And so I think Boris would have been subject to those.
Good. Sam Fowles, you're a good man. If your ambition is to stop them lying, then you're part of our team.
Absolutely.
We love you. Well done. Thanks, Sam. We'll see you next week,
Thanks,
hopefully.
guys.
And get your throat better.
Cheers.
Gargle.
Yeah, get well. Right.